All right. Well, hello and welcome, everyone. This is a very exciting workshop on using cooperative learning in higher education classes, practical experiences of college instructors. It's really my honor and pleasure to welcome everyone here. We have a fantastic international audience that we're expecting, close to 50 people. I'm Lloyd Rieber. I am a professor of learning design and technology at the University of Georgia. I'm just absolutely delighted to see the number of people who are here with us today. Obviously, the question of how to use cooperative learning in higher education is one that many people are interested in, and maybe perhaps a little perplexed how to do it, and particularly how to do it well. And I definitely fall into that camp. So I expect to learn a great deal today. My main role today is to act as host. I'm broadcasting from the University of Georgia, and the originator and prime organizer of this workshop, Dr. Roxanne Bailey, is just a few doors down from me here in Athens, Georgia, at the university. Roxanne is a senior lecturer at the University of Johannesburg, South Africa. She is definitely an up-and-coming international scholar in the area of self-directed learning and cooperative learning. Dr. Bailey will be joined today by Dr. Xigui Yang, a very recent graduate of the University of Georgia and our Learning Design Technology program. And I'm very proud to say one of my, former advisees. Her specialty is group work, and she'll be sharing some wisdom gained through her very interesting doctoral dissertation on learner frustrations, where she enlisted something called Q methodology that we'll talk briefly about. And she used that to develop something called learning personas as an aid or to support group work. Dr. Bailey and Dr. Yang will be our main guides here today during the workshop. We're also joined by Tutaleni Asino of Oklahoma State University. Dr. Asino is an associate professor of learning design and technology at Oklahoma State, and he is the director of the Emerging Technology and Creativity Research Lab at Oklahoma State. Dr. Asino will close out our workshop experience today as we go over some kind of shared remarks, and he'll have some final remarks as well. Let's go to the next slide. I just want to make sure people know what we're up to today. We really want to make this interactive. We want to live up to the idea of a workshop. So my introduction is going to be concluding very soon, and we'll be moving on. But as you can see, we're going to have two breakout sessions that are going to last about 5 minutes or so. As you can see, we're going to have time for some feedback from the groups after each of those. We'll have some very brief introductions, maybe mini presentations to try to get the ball rolling on some of this. But we really want to make sure we have opportunities for people to talk about their experiences, to share their insights, and so on. And then if we stay on time, we'll have some time for about a 10-minute discussion or wrap-up discussion that, again, Dr. Asino will guide us in and then provide some final thoughts. So if we stay on time, we all cooperate, we'll be done in 90 minutes. And we'll just leave the slide there. I just want to just kind of start off with a few thoughts. I don't know about you, but I get really confused about terms describing times when students are working together. We have terms like cooperative learning, collaborative learning, group work. These terms are just bandied about. And I think oftentimes people use these terms interchangeably, but are they the same? If not, how are they different? So let me just start with a key definition. And fortunately, I had access to Xigui's doctoral dissertation. And so using that as my main resource, she quoted the famous Johnson and Johnson brothers. Their definition of cooperative learning is the instructional use of small groups so that students work together to maximize their own and each other's learning. And I know, too, I've known this over the years, they have long emphasized interdependence in group work, meaning the students, and this is then a quote from them, can reach their learning goals if and only if other students in the learning group also reach their goals. And just a general definition of cooperation would be, it can be defined as a structure of interaction designed to facilitate the accomplishment of a specific end product or goal through people working together in groups. Now, definitions of collaborative learning or group learning, in contrast, can be a little bit hazy here. And I think this is where Roxanne and Xigui are probably the better guides to help us through this. And I'm sure some of these comparisons will come out today during the workshop and our conversations. And I think this is a really good point for me to stop talking and to turn things over to Roxanne Bailey to give us some guidance on these issues as we get this workshop started. So, Dr. Bailey.
So welcome from my side as well. It's really lovely to have so many participants have signed up. Not everyone has joined. I don't know if it's a time zone confusion or if it's a Friday confusion, but thank you very much for those of you that have joined. Especially, I want to say thank you to my University of Johannesburg colleagues that also took the time. I know it's 4:30 on a Friday, so traffic is waiting and the weekend is waiting. So thanks for that. So as Dr. Rieber was saying, there's quite a lot of confusion sometimes with regard to what cooperative learning is and what collaborative learning is. And I've even in my conversations with people have realized that people use it interchangeably, but it's not always a matter of any rose by any name smells just as sweet. There is really quite a difference between what we call collaborative learning and what is coined as cooperative learning. And the main difference being the structure and the guidance provided by the lecturer or the faculty or you call it what you, the instructor, you can call it whatever you want. So just to say, when we speak about cooperative learning, we really are referring to what was coined by the Johnsons with the 5 basic elements. And I will talk about this later. So if we are going to move on throughout this workshop, I want you to also think of times where you have experienced group work that might have been called cooperative learning, but it was actually an unstructured collaborative learning experience. Of course, there's similarities, and I think for someone like myself that's a social constructivist, any group activity is always better than in isolation. And naturally, we just tend to work with others. But if it's not structured well, a lot of times it can really cause frustration for our learners and our students in our class, and even for ourselves. I think all of us have experienced being in a group ourselves where frustrations were experienced. So with that being said, that was just a short introduction to say that we are going to speak about cooperative learning, but when you're sharing your experiences, you can really share your experiences from within any group setting that you have experienced. So with that, Xigui, I'm going to hand over to you and go on, and I'm sure we can all hear you as well.
Thank you, Dr. Bailey, for your introduction. I'll talk about some common frustrations students might have in group work, whether you're doing collaborative learning or cooperative learning. So there are some challenges in the design and implementation of group learning that might lead to frustrations in the students. For example, depending on your purposes and the learning context, you need to consider the group formation in terms of the group size, the selection of group members. You need to consider, students' learning performances, the different preferences, skills, and abilities, and all that. Sometimes students just not satisfied however you assign them to groups. So this can be one of the sources for frustrations. And a lot of issues can arise in the process of group dynamics in terms of communication, negotiation, and workload distribution. And assessing the groups and the individual students fairly is not an easy task either. And most importantly, to design meaningful tasks that require real collaboration is also a challenge. So next slide, I will talk about the 5 learner personas I created based on the students' different perceptions or frustrations in group work. So basically, students have different preferences in group work, and they have different focuses and goals in their group work. So there are goal-oriented collaborators who focus more to complete the task on time in good quality, and sometimes they don't mind to pick up the slack of others because as long as they can get the good grades they want, they don't mind too much of that. And they're also fairness-oriented independent learners who just prefer independent work instead of group work, and they do not like picking up slacks from other people. And they're also learning-oriented collaborators. They pay more attention about learning and real collaboration. And the 4th learner persona is instruction-dependent learners. They prefer to have everything laid out very clearly so that they don't have to interact with anybody else, so they can just do the work with the clear instructions. And adaptive collaborators usually have very negative experience in their previous group work, but they manage to adapt to not to let all those frustrations to affect how they learn and how they feel. So they are okay, they feel like okay, but a lot of experience are negative for them. If you are interested to learn more about these personas, I have a link for you to share with you later. And so now I'll let you share your experiences in small groups. Please remember that please remember your breakout room numbers because we'd like you to join the same group later. And in your groups, you will be divided into groups of 4, and we assign you to some roles so that you can collaborate more effectively. You don't have to remember this. I'll have this in the next slide, and you can take a screenshot later. So the roles will be assigned according to the alphabetic order of your last names. So the first last name will be the timekeeper. The second last name will be the critical thinker. The third last name will be the scribe. And the fourth will be the advocate. So if you only have 3 people in your group, then let's have the timekeeper be the critical thinker too. Okay. I see that more people are joining. If we break them out into small groups right now, they might not be able to join this discussion. So, okay.
So just to say, we will have enough groups that if more join, we will be able to just manually add them to that group. So I think we'll have about 6 groups, and that will leave at least about 6 spaces roundabout that we could just add as they join. Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Rieber. Next slide. So in your group, you have 20 minutes to get to know each other and also to share a little bit about your experiences with students' frustrations in group work. So take a few minutes to talk about who you are, where you're from, and your teaching experience and something like that. And also to discuss what kind of frustrations have you observed students experience in the process of group work in your own teaching, and what strategies have been helpful for you to resolve or prevent those frustrations, and what aspects do you feel like you need more help with? And then we'll come back to the large group to share what you have discussed in your small group. I would suggest you to take a screenshot of this page so that you know, you don't have to remember everything. And also, when time is up, please choose leave the breakout room, not to leave the meeting. There are 2 choices for you. Don't leave the meeting. And again, please remember your breakout room number. Do you have any questions before we go to the breakout rooms? Yeah, you can put the question in the chat or you can raise your hand. Okay. If not, I'll give the opportunity for Dr. Rieber to set up the breakout rooms.
Okay, so I'm about to create the breakout rooms, and you're going to be again sent, kind of at random to all these. And again, to emphasize what Xigui say, take a moment to see what room you're in, because you're going to go back as a whole group, as a group later on in a second breakout session. Okay, here you go. And you should be receiving an invitation to go to a room. So feel free to accept it, and we'll see if there's any glitches here.
Okay. Okay, welcome back, everyone. So now let's share what you have discussed in your groups. I've heard that there's some very interesting discussion going on. So any volunteers to share?
Xigui,
Yes.
Dr. Yang, congratulations.
Thank you, Dr. Yu.
Yes, I can share from group 3. So this is just some examples because I don't want to take all of our time, just in terms of some of the frustrations that we saw that a lot of students are in. I think that one of your categories, Xigui, was instructor driven. right? They really like instruction
Yeah.
and being told.
Mhm.
The one that came up was like this willingness for them to even participate, right? Like students just refusing to do it. Right?
Yeah.
So that was another frustration we talked about, and just general not liking it. In terms of some of the strategies that we discussed, having a project focus for the group or some kind of like focused activity seems to help. Letting the students know that that the instructor is going to have feedback on the team as they're getting started, and actually collecting that feedback and then using that to have additional conversations if needed. Having smaller groups of like 2 to 4 and not letting them get too big, and then actually assigning roles or tasks for the students that are in the groups. And then finally, in terms of the assistants, a couple of things that came out in terms of questions is what happens when you have someone who dominates the group, right? And decides they're doing all the work, or they just start doing all the work. And then what do you do with students that refuse to participate? Like refuse, just don't do it. Right? Like, and one example that came up was if you put them into a think, pair, share, where it's the 2 of them and they just don't do it.
Yeah.
So those are some of the things we talked about.
Thank you for sharing. Yeah, I think it's not rare that some students just resist towards group, but they prefer to do it alone. Sometimes like that. I think we need to let them know that the importance of the group work, why we are doing that, why it's important, and then maybe give them some freedom of choice so that they can do something they like. That's something. For the people who really refuse to do it, I feel like sometimes we really don't have anything can help. And maybe what we can do to minimize the damage is to help the other contributing group members to not influenced by this stacking group member. We help them to stabilize their emotions, like something like that, to let them know that I'm helping with you. I understand you're in this situation that you do not want to get involved in. That's what I do usually. And I give them more constructive feedback to let them know that I appreciate their work and dealing with the other member. But at the same time, I'll also ask them to give the opportunity for the non-contributing group member whenever they are willing to do something. But there's not really much I can do. But maybe others can share their insights, what you can do to prevent this. Thank you for room 3. Any other rooms to share your discussion?
May I go ahead? Room 5?
Oh, okay. So we are fighting for the space here. Okay.
And not get a cold at the same time. So from room 5, most of the frustrations you listed were brought up. A new lecturer who's only just been full-time for a short time put the students into new groups, and of course the students didn't like that. Another one, a student refused to participate, but it was something for marks, so the student didn't get any marks in the end for that activity because she came with stories around being in this group and not getting on and being excluded and things like that. Generally, the students always divide up the work, and the other frustration is one or two people dominating always, and others sitting back and letting everything be done for them. On the solutions that have been tried, assigning roles, as mentioned, and the importance of rotating those roles for different activities so that people get experience. One of our members allows them to select their own groups, so they're not forced to work with people they don't normally work with. Setting ground rules, the importance of having very clear ground rules. And one suggestion that I love that we've done something similar in a social situation before, is actually physically passing a baton. So that,
Passing a baton? What does that mean?
yes, you have a baton. I talk, you say your 2 points, you pass
Okay.
it on, the next person says their 2
Okay,
points.
yeah, taking turns to do that.
Yeah, taking turns to do that. On the issue of students refusing to participate, you need to make some credit for the activity. And if a student refuses to do group work, then they don't get anything. That's the only thing that I found that makes this work.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing. Yeah.
Sorry, room 5, did I miss anything major?
Anything to add?
No, it's fine. I think you touched everything that we discussed in a nice summary there.
Thank you.
All right.
Yeah.
May I comment on
Dr.
those?
Branch.
Those are very helpful.
Yeah.
Thank you, Group 5. That was very helpful. 2 things struck out to me that I need to give thought to because you reinforced them. The very first one was the whole notion of making sure that that group members are informed that they are going to be looked at by someone, and that it'll be looked at the end. But the second one is, I just want to put this out here as we continue to listen. So students resisting working with someone that they don't want to work with. When I've encountered that situation, I've reminded them that the purpose of this is to simulate the reality outside the classroom. And guess what? Outside the classroom, you will not always have the good fortune to only work with whom you choose. And then I let the conversation go from there. And that's what I thought of as the Group 5 speaker was making those comments. Thank you.
That's a very good point. Thank you, Dr. Branch, for chiming in to say that. Yeah. Any other insight? Any other groups to share? I don't want to talk too much at this point. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay,
we can
I
go.
can go to group 1.
Oh no.
Group 1, please.
Okay. No, let that Saki goes. Yes, we'll be next. Group 6 will be next, but I will stand back for now.
Okay.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. We were in room 1. I guess that is group 1.
Okay.
And interestingly, we were all Namibians in the group. Yes, the frustration, almost the same of what was said already, but I think, the frustration is that students are working in a group, and if they are not working equally, one will benefit even the person did not contribute at all. So we receive the same grade. So that is really frustrating. Also, that some students will just there folding their hands and sitting back and do nothing really, as if they are forced to be in there. And frustration could be that there is just lack of contribution. Students are not contributing, they are not communicating, they are not collaborating. So those things were mentioned in a group. But on the strategy, on the strategies that they were also mentioned, is assigning roles and have more rules in place to manage the groups. And also assigning roles, meaning that you held people accountable. And also, it was also said that if you are going to meet them, if they have a project to work with, meet them, all of them as a group, not individually, so that you receive a feedback from everyone. There was also an interesting point that maybe in some fields, group works better than in other in other fields. Like in mathematics, it was pointed out that generally the observation was that the student work better there in compare maybe to other fields. Also the level in terms of undergraduate, postgraduate, it is very difficult to manage undergraduate groups compared to postgraduates. So yeah, that's what we came up with. But the time really went very fast.
Yeah, I would hope that we have more time for you to discuss. Yeah,
Yes.
so stacking group members or trying to hold everyone accountable is the kind of like a number one focus for instructors to get the group working effectively. So from my own experience, I would do peer evaluations so that I tell them at the very beginning that you are going to be evaluated by your peers, and then we'll know that if you are doing anything or not, and that will affect their final grade. So I adjust their individual grades based on peer evaluations, and also I ask them to give me progress reports regularly, like every week, to check their progress so that I can identify or spot those issues early on so that I can correct them if possible. And yeah. Do we have more time for more people to share a little bit?
I have a question.
Yes.
You just made mention of peer evaluation at the end of
Yeah.
that. Peer evaluation is subjective.
Yes, it is.
Yes, because you find that those who are in groups, maybe they are friends and all those things. So how do you overcome that? There will be no justice. Because when you say peer, we are with my friend, we are so cordial. I will write good things, whatever he didn't do, I will say he did it very well. So as a result, I don't believe that peer evaluation will solve the problem. Unless if you say the evaluation will be done by you as a lecturer, but to say peer evaluation, I don't know. I need clarity on that.
Oh, when I say peer evaluation, I mean they evaluate each other. So I give them the opportunity to evaluate themselves. What do they say about themselves, their own contributions in the group, and what they say about each member. So I know the peer evaluation is subjective, but if you compare all the group members' evaluations, you will identify the problems. And at the same time, you are observing them in the process too. So you kind of know that who is working, who is not working. Peer evaluations does not always work. But I think it works sometimes too. Yeah.
I'm going to step in. This is a really great conversation, but we've got a lot really more great stuff coming up. So, and I know there's another group that wanted to speak, and I really apologize to that group because they had something really important to say. But let's move on. I know, Xigui, you have some thoughts also to really help some of these.
I share that.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and move on to that, so we can get through the agenda.
So let's go ahead to let Dr. Bailey to talk about the foundations of corporate learning, because a lot of frustrations can be avoided by providing more structures, like what you have mentioned, assigning roles and responsibilities. That's one of examples. Okay, I'll give the floor to Dr. Bailey.
Thank you, Xigui. Thank you, Dr. Rieber. Do you just want to mention, colleagues, that we will be going back to the same groups to really move the conversation into a deeper level, especially now that our minds are starting to think of these things. And the reason why we started with looking at the frustrations is because we have experienced frustrations, a lot of us. I also do want to just mention that we will still have a large group feedback or discussion session at the end. So I think then we'll also have some time for questions and answers, so we can pop in. And what I'm actually loving is the fact that we are giving each other ideas. None of us have the perfect recipe yet, because the people that are sitting in front of us are every time different. So these are all ideas, but I love the fact that we are actually helping each other in this process. So as Dr. Rieber mentioned, there are obviously different definitions to cooperative learning, but I would say that the fathers of cooperative learning would be the Johnson brothers, and for them, they really describe it that you maximize your own learning, and individual's learning is maximized when the group's learning is actually maximized. And although we do have colleagues like Professor Slavin or Dr. Slavin that also had a lot of work and foundational work in cooperative learning, I think the family that really has done the most is definitely the Johnson brothers. And what they did was they actually compiled 5 basic elements that they reckon if you have a group, any group activity, if you implement these 5 elements, that group activity will actually succeed. And I took some notes on the frustrations, and I think a lot of these notes I can clearly see that a lot of them could actually be addressed if you actually implement or stimulate the 5 basic principles. So my advice, if any, would be that you really put on your thinking caps and see how you can actually make use of these 5 elements in your classes. What I do want to ask is if you can also take a screenshot of the 5 elements, because we will be going back to our groups and then discussing this. So I'm going to just quickly talk through them, and then, like I say, we'll move on. So positive interdependence, Dr. Rieber also mentioned that, is this feeling of that we are not dependent on each other, but really interdependent. If you sink, we both sink, or the whole group sinks. But if you swim and I help you to succeed, I also succeed. And obviously, having different roles and different responsibilities really help with that. Then we have individual accountability. And this, I find, especially for your individualized learners, this is something that really helps, is the fact that they know they are also being held accountable individually, although they are busy in a group setting or in a cooperative activity. So one way that you can do that is often by giving an individual mark as well. And I know we want to move away from marks, but learners and students do still want to know that they're getting credit for their own contributions. What am I bringing to the table, and am I actually getting more credit for it as opposed to someone that's maybe slacking? And that also obviously helps to know or to identify the learner that actually is slacking, if you bring in this individual accountability. Then we have promotive face-to-face interaction, and that is the fact that I actually have resources that you don't have, and vice versa. So I realize that I am bringing something to the table, and I can challenge you, and we can actually construct knowledge together because of this interaction that would not have been able if I'd been working alone. Then obviously the social skills element, we as instructors often, or facilitators, lecturers, think and just assume that every learner or every student actually have social skills, and it's part of the 21st century skills, and we know it's important, but we need to also think, how are we stimulating these social skills in our group activities? Are we actually building in places where conflict management can occur, communication can occur? And it's also something that you need to think of, perhaps even assessing each other's, the group members' communication skills, ask them to speak about that. And then lastly, something that I think really helps a lot is group processing, where the group sits together and reflects on what really worked well, what didn't work well, what should I take from this group activity to the next group activity that can actually enhance that next activity, or even my own individual work for that matter. What did I learn from this? And I think most of us won't argue that metacognition and the reflection really helps with critical thinking, 21st century skills development, etc. And once again, working in a group can actually help you stimulate that. So I know it sounds like a lot of work if you think you have to still stimulate these 5 elements, but once you start getting into it, and I think a lot of the strategies that people have mentioned, what really makes me excited is that intuitively, if we really think about our group work, we actually start stimulating these 5 basic elements without us even knowing it. Like, for instance, dividing into roles, having peer evaluations, you know, making sure that the groups aren't too big. All those things that you guys have mentioned are ways of stimulating the five elements. But the point being is that you need to be intentional about it. Otherwise, frustrations will most definitely occur. So as Dr. Rieber mentioned, we are going to, you have all now remembered your group, hopefully, where you were, and you will be setting up the 6 groups again. Don't worry, there was no one in group 4. So if you remember that you were in group 4, you are mistaken, because you weren't. So we will have 4 roles again, the same roles: timekeeper, critical thinker, scribe, and advocate. And you can call them or make any roles that you want when you're actually doing cooperative learning. These are just ones that we thought of and or that we use. So the timekeeper will be the person with the first birthday in the year, the critical thinker the second birthday in the year, the scribe the third, and then the advocate the fourth. And the reason why I actually do this is that we often see that the more extroverted, non-shy person will easily say, oh, I'll be the advocate, or I'll do this, or I'll do that, and they'll choose what they like. And if you are assigning the roles, then you know you really are pushing your students to expand their skill base as well. So your task will then be to evaluate the effectiveness of cooperative learning based on lived experiences of college instructors, which will then be you, and then to create a presentation to illustrate your findings. Now, the presentation really needs not be a formal presentation. You can just take some notes. I do, however, want to warn you that we will randomly ask someone to present, and we will start with group 1 that didn't get a chance to talk in the first round. But we will actually have Tutaleni be a very important person by just calling out the timekeeper will be presenting, or the critical thinker. And this is a way of also making sure that there's interdependence, there's individual accountability, etc. So it's all part of the 5 elements. So be sure that you are also comfortable to present your work for your group. Don't slack and don't read emails. Please contribute. I'm just going to give you 2 seconds to take a screenshot of this, and then we'll go back into the groups. Are there any questions? Maybe I can just ask that.
Roxanne, just it should be group 6 with Christos, because group 1 went.
Okay, thanks for that. Thanks very much.
No. I just thought we're all going to report back, so I thought quicker the better. So it's not that there's any urgent need to report back. So
don't worry, we can't wait to hear from group 6. Okay, then I think we can start. Because we all know each other now, we're going to start the timer immediately, and it will be 20 minutes, and then we'll come back for a larger feedback and wrap up.
All right, so I'm going to get you going into your rooms. And I always learn something about Zoom. Apparently, Zoom has remembered what room you were in before. So this might even be easier. So I'm about to open the rooms and have a good conversation. Here we go. Welcome back, everybody. Okay, I think we're all here, and we'll turn things back over to Roxanne.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rieber, and colleagues. Thanks for everyone engaging. You know, I think this is why time is catching us quite quickly. So maybe just randomly, if we can start with group 6, if we can have your critical thinker just share some ideas. What were your thoughts on the elements in terms of, you know, do you think you actually have been addressing these elements? Could they help with the frustrations? Keep it nice, sweet and short. Group 6, critical thinker.
Oh, we must confess now. We don't know who's the. We just have. So can I? No, but you know, you guys who are doing this cooperative learning, did you ever think now when you said we're going to now go to our rooms and when we come back we're going to ask anybody to report back? Do you think you're actually creating a bit of anxiety in the group members, and you're so busy trying to memorize everything that you don't want to caught off guard that you actually don't enjoy the activity? So is there any value in that kind of feeling we create in learners? So it can be quite stressful to be part of a cooperative learning class. So just besides the point. So yes, I think we can ask because in our group, Nambata, she's also from Namibia. So we actually were an African group, so from Namibia, Nigeria, and South Africa. But I think Nambata, with a large group, she actually doing this in her own way. She actually did hit a lot of these principles of cooperative learning. Maybe we can just ask her to tell how she does it and how does she divide the work, the roles amongst the learners, her students. Okay.
Oh my goodness. Okay. It's what we have learned. Those principles, they are quite, they will work, but it depends on individual lecturers. For me, or for the whole group, there was the last point, processing of what? That one we said we can adapt it into our systems. Excuse me? Yes, yes. We said that one we can put it in our system to use it. Scribing and those, for me, most of us, we are already using it. Especially for me, I have a large group of about 1,500 students. You have 10 students in a group. Instead of giving them what roles they should be taking, I give them the opportunity to tell me who did what in that group, so that in the real world, no one will come and tell you, your supervisor, not to come and say, go and tell who is the one who should be a leader. They must sit amongst themselves. They will know themselves. They will know this one is a critical thinker. This one is, when they come to present, I just want them to present and say, this one was a leader of whatever task. That is how I deal with it. Then instead of giving them already a task myself, I give them that opportunity to come and report to me. Then they are comfortable to do it and they do their best because they have already knowing each other when they were sitting together. Okay?
Nice. I think that is very nice. And unfortunately, like I say, our time is quite crunching. I think we also started maybe a few minutes late, just getting everyone in. But I think what really is clear is that we actually have a lot of answers to each other's challenges. And I engaged with some of the groups as well, saying that the debate needs to be opened up and we need to start realizing that we can help each other. So if I just in a 20 seconds say what I do with my students is I set up the groups myself just because of that dodgeball effect of some students never feeling like they are chosen, and assigning the roles definitely helps. These are things that I've tested over a few years in my classes that have really helped. Making use of time as I'm sure a lot of you know or can see, time is quite important. I move around in my classes if it's a face-to-face class, or like I did now with the Zoom, move in and out. That also increases the teaching presence if you are aware of the community of inquiry framework. And then also adapt, after having discussions with students, find out from the students what works, how can you adapt, what would they like differently, but also realize that you are the facilitator that might see the bigger picture that the student don't see. So Xigui, do you want to maybe just share some experiences from your side?
I think you're muted.
sorry. So in my own teaching, I designed a Q-sort discussion for the students before assigning them to a major group project. The reason I do this is because it's from my own frustrations that no matter how well I prepare or design the group work, there's always some kind of issues that I cannot expect. And yeah, sometimes they're just students who do not want to participate at all. And so for this Q-sort discussion, I first give them a list of 31 statements about frustrations to rank order from least frustrating to most frustrating, because different students have different perceptions on the same frustrations. And then I assign them to small groups to discuss their Q-sorts with students who have similar sorting of these statements, so that they can have a conversation with people, have similar viewpoints, and they can feel like I'm not the person, I'm not alone. This kind of frustrations is common and it's okay, and we can deal with it. So next slide. The Q-sort discussion really gives them the opportunity to reflect on their own group experience and reevaluate their own behaviors, so they have a better understanding of their own perspectives. And at the same time, they can learn about different perspectives, so they can develop empathy towards other peers. They can understand that, okay, there are different situations and people have different preferences and we all learn differently. And at the same time, they will discuss some strategies to overcome frustrations in group work. So the learner personas I introduced earlier are also developed from the data I collected in this Q-sort discussion. Yeah, if you are interested, I can share more links about the work that I've done in my classrooms. Yeah, that's my response. Yeah, thank you.
All right. Thank you. I think the good thing is that we did a lot of these conversations already in our two group share. I think everybody really, many of you contributed to how you can apply these into your classes and everything else. But I know we're running out of time, but does anybody, maybe one or two people, just want to share a little bit about a response to any of these questions here, how you can apply these ideas in your class, and what will be, maybe your main takeaway from today's session, and so forth. I want to be respectful of your time because I know we're running up against it. So let me just move us to the last slide for the wrap up. And then if you can please use the chat window to just share with the group what was your one takeaway. What did you learn from this session today? We went through a lot, and I think for me, one of the thing that was most exciting is the diverse representation in the group in terms of geographical representation and different kind of institutions. So that allowed us to really be able to examine, especially some of these 5 basic elements from a cross-cultural perspective. In one of the groups that I was in, just as an example of the cross-cultural, one of our colleagues, Lloyd, shared that, there was an instructor who used to give sweets and snacks at some of these sort of group work sessions, collaborative learning sessions, and then they took that away, and some of the students stopped coming. Now that went into a longer conversation about how about schools that maybe have feeding programs and so on, and if that element is removed, students are coming to school hungry and everything else, how does that impact the sort of group work environment? I don't think some of those things are necessarily built into this framework, but I think it's an illustration of how we can also really adapt this into our own specific context and be able to really make it culturally specific. For us, as part of the workshop, one of the reasons why we wanted to really touch on this is, if you look on the right hand of the screen, why cooperative learning matters. We know that regardless of whether you call it cooperative learning, whether you call it collaboration, whether you call it group work, the point here, and I think Rob Branch said this earlier, is that it's supposed to really mimic what's happening in the real world, right? We need to have our students develop certain skills there's certain outcomes associated with this, such as, active learning, active engagement, students being able to develop social skills, peer support and encouragement, and so forth. These are skills that they're going to be learning and going to be using in real life post-university. So the question is, if one of our frustration is that the students are having a difficulty embracing these type of group work or collaborative learning, what does that say then about how they're going to be functioning in the workforce? So we really have to figure out a way to incorporate and support this approach and find a way to really generate more buy-in to our students if we are to meet the specific outcomes that we would like to meet. So I went through that relatively fast, but let me pass it over to Lloyd to give us some closing remarks and final thoughts.
I will be very, very brief because we are over time. I really appreciate those of you who have hung in with us. Yes, our contact information is up on the screen, and I think what Roxanne was saying earlier, that we just started the conversation. I think it is clear that this is a very important topic that people are struggling with, and I think we all value, having students interact and to learn from each other and so forth, and then to figure out ways to actually structure that. But let me just say, I just want to thank everyone for coming today. A big, big thank you to Roxanne Bailey and Xigui Yang for helping us today understand not only the value of cooperative learning, but also beginning to understand ways to practice it effectively. And thank you, Tutaleni, for your help today and all of your concluding thoughts. But most of all, I really want to thank everyone who has participated today. I've learned tons, and I really hope to give cooperative learning another try in my own teaching. But most of all, I really appreciate having this opportunity to meet such a diverse, interesting international audience. So again, our contact information is up there, and feel free to follow up with any of us if you'd like to. So thank you all for coming. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity. Bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Can I ask a question?
Oh, of course.
Yeah, I think the workshop has been recorded, and then all the rubric that were displayed, I hope we will get a venue or means of getting it so that we can also go over it again and again in form of slides.
Yeah, that kind of was our intent, that we're going to be very careful. We're not going to share this outside the group at all, but I think we can get the recording and also perhaps some of the slides, whatever, to you all. So is that correct, Roxanne? I don't want to speak out of turn.
Yeah, I don't know about the recording. We can maybe still just discuss that, but definitely the slides. I think none of us have a problem sharing the slides, so we will definitely make the slides available. And I'm sure, because there wasn't really much said that wasn't written on the slides, as opposed to just some conversations.
Yeah.
So I think the slideshow would actually suffice as quite a nice resource. Yes.
Yeah, I think so. I think we're all very concerned about privacy, and we wanted to kind of capture the wisdom here. So if we redo this workshop and do it in other places, we can always improve it. But no, the point's well taken.
Thank you very much.
Actually, with that, I'm going to stop the recording.